Good evening to everybody. We are again, we have a session with Dietmar Pichler from Vienna about this time disinformation. And Dietmar, go ahead. It's up to you now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's a difficult time. I'm almost out of words because every day it is getting worse. Our topic today is Russian disinformation. I skipped any kind of presentation because of the recent events. I think we do not need a history lesson, so I will be very brief in my introduction. I'm a disinformation analyst. I'm a media literacy trainer, so I think that this topic is very important for Europe since 2014. It is very important to talk about it because since back then we have this huge Russian disinformation campaign against especially Ukraine, but also against Europe. This is very interconnected because Europe already supported Ukraine in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and the aggression in Donbass. And now we see a similar situation, but much worse. It's incomparable almost, yeah. And when we take a look what happened in the last months, starting in autumn 2021, we saw that the Russian military buildup on Ukraine's borders, for instance, was accompanied by a huge disinformation campaign. First of all, Vladimir Putin said it's just exercises, and he said it is because of the wish from Ukraine to join NATO, and more he changed to a terrible propaganda against Ukraine, that there is a genocide going on, that Ukrainian government is a government of neo-Nazis, and that they want basically to kill all ethnic Russian people in Donbass. But the usual Russian propaganda is that they want to clean Ukraine completely from Russian-speaking people. And that is the complete lie. It's so wrong on so many levels. I have been to Ukraine about, I guess, 30 or 40 times, maybe more. So many times in all parts of the country, east, west, central Ukraine, for instance, Kyiv, very well-known city. And even in Kyiv, almost everybody speaks Russian on a daily basis. If we take a look at the eastern regions, also people also speak Russian all the time. There is no ban of language. There is no discrimination. The president is a Jewish, Russian-speaking Ukrainian from a more eastern region, far east from Kyiv. And yeah, what should I say? That this whole war is based on lies more than any other war before, if we forget about World War II, because I'm very careful to make any kind of comparisons, because I think that in European history that the aggression of the German regime is incomparable usually. But unfortunately, we see a lot of similarities. The lie about protecting ethnic groups, this thinking, this history lessons Mr. Putin gives, that he thinks that everything belongs to Russia, that he needs to, that this division was a mistake. And we should take a look which countries are involved in this kind of history thinking by Vladimir Putin. And then we have to accept that it's not only Ukraine, it's also Georgia, it's also Moldova. They are in big danger now. But unfortunately, not only them, it's also about the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. It's also about Finland, and it's also about parts of Poland. And this is not new. This is not what is happening now. This is not a complete surprise. If we take a look at the ideology of the regime, it was something that we saw 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, for instance, with this with his consultant or advisor, ideology-wise, Alexander Dugin, and he had this idea of this Eurasianism, and Mr. Sakharchenko, who was one of the leaders of these so-called pro-Russian republics in the East, he also said that we don't need to take only Kyiv, we need to take Berlin as well, we need to take England and other regions, and we have to restore the Russian Empire. By the way, England was not part of the Russian Empire, so this is even more than the worst case scenario of some people. And the problem was for many years, nobody talked about it here in the West or in Europe. So you had to consult Russian sources. You had to take a look what are they actually planning? What are they writing about? And the discussion about the negotiations, so-called negotiations with Vladimir Putin in the last weeks or last months, that was a fake negotiation, and it was based on the assumption of Western politicians that you can negotiate with him like with a normal politician of a democratic country. I mean, we know all politicians lie, of course. We don't trust them as usual citizens, but this is something different. Yeah, this is the whole campaign and the whole war campaign and the whole politics, the whole doctrine of Russian politics, Russian foreign politics is based on disinformation, based on lies, or based on propaganda views, on narratives that we don't understand, that are not based on our value systems, that are not based on logical thinking. And I have to say that this is scary, that we cannot predict what is happening now. I'm not a military analyst, so I cannot say who is going to win or which city will fall next or something like that. But what I can see that if we take a look at the statements of the regime, if we take a look what they are telling us now, I think that the lies, the basis of this information is so terrible. I do not think that many people still believe in it. But the reason we are here today, the reason for this seminar was another one, because it was the time when people still not realized what kind of disinformation campaign Russia is doing. So it was 2014, 2015, when I tried to explain what is behind and what kind of mechanism is working. And we, in Germany, Austria, and also other countries, Italy, Hungary, maybe, we try to ignore all the signs of what is really behind Vladimir Putin's politics, to make business, have economic relations, have a kind of balance, which was always a false balance. And now we see what is happening, and unfortunately we finance this system with our economic relations. So we didn't change it. It was not that there was democratic development. Russia is now an autocracy. It's more a dictatorship now. They are increasing restrictions of the media every day, especially since the war. So, well, I'm very worried, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Dietmar. Well, I think this is a very succinct introduction to what we are living now. I've just, before this the session, I was reading a story about François Thom in Russia, in a Russia blog. Let me get to it because I tried to print it, but it's not coming out. It's and actually a very interesting desk. Russie is a French site, and it's the story is how to train Europe, the Kremlin's exploitation of the Ukrainian crisis. I'll share this link later. And it just said something very scary. It's when Putin Yeltsin met with Bill Clinton, he was already saying, why don't you give us Europe? You give us Europe, you pull out of Europe, you had nothing to do in Europe, and you can take all the countries you want outside Europe. we will take care of Europe, we'll protect Europe, we're strong enough to protect Europe. And then Putin, of course, came back to it much more forcefully. But the idea behind it, as we suspect, some of us suspect, but this is actually confirms it, is that the Russians want to take over Europe, and they want to kick out the Americans from Europe simply to take over Europe, because they think it's their territory. This gigantic, if you look at the map of Russia, there's this gigantic Russia, this tiny Europe at the bottom. They want to take over, they want to give us their protection. In other words, they want to turn us into a colony. So this is a very chilling reminder who we are dealing with and what are the real intentions. So after adding this small element across which I came today, have any questions from the audience?
There's a question from Christian.
As I understand, the Putinesque disinformation machinery, it is part of the Gerasimov doctrine. Something we actually discussed on Friday during our session on Russia. What can be done to shut down the troll farms and the useful idiots in the West? Thank you, Christian. So, Dietmar.
Yeah, first of all, yes, it is not a new idea. So what Russia did is also it built up economically, and it gained the finances and the resources for new weapons, but also for new disinformation weapons, or to build up this and this was by Gerasimov. He said that we will win on this war on another field, and the answer for the question against the troll farms, yeah, is still the same answer that I would give you 1 week before. We need media literacy, and we need it now. And we need a media literacy like we haven't thought about never before, because in 2014, actually nothing happened. A little bit, the EU was quite concerned, and then there was this little think tank, EU versus disinformation. They are super underfinanced. So also small things, yeah. But we need much, much more. We need fact checking, first of all, so that the people get constantly every disinformation fact checked, so that if somebody is posting, sorry for my word, bullshit, then there must be another person who says, sorry, this is not true, and has the source link for the fact checking. But we also need media literacy. We need people who can critically analyze wrong narratives by the Russian Federation. And the troll farms, I think it's very difficult to shut them down until we kick Russia out of our social media, and that would be very harsh, because that would backfire. Because yeah, let me tell you one thing. Since the war began, I was obsessed with one idea, and I tried my best to accomplish it. I contacted all Ukrainians I knew, and I asked them, please talk to people in Russia. You have many friends in Russia. You speak fluent Russian. Talk to them and tell them what is actually going on in Ukraine. You're sitting in a bunker. You're sitting in your apartment. 5 people. There is wood on your window. You are afraid. Tell them how you feel. Tell them what is actually happening. And it's the opposite of what's going on in state television. And I can tell you, a lot of people tried to do something. They already did, not because I told them, they already did. They said, yeah, thanks for the tip, but we already tried it, and it fails. It fails on so many levels that a daughter is sitting in Kharkiv, which is getting shelled all the time, and her mother in Russia doesn't believe her. She still believes the lies of the Kremlin, which she sees on state television. So we have on one hand the trolls influencing our society, influencing our democracy and telling us lies, but we also have a situation that we are not able to counter the propaganda which is happening in the Russian Federation. We are not able to debunk lies about the Western world. It was on the beginning of the war that a friend told me, his family is also in Russia, that actually in Russia now they are claiming that Putin is attacking NATO bases, but there are none. Yeah, so this is completely ridiculous, but people still believe it. Yeah, because if you repeat a lie very often, then you believe it. And so we have the problem that we need to attack somehow, but in the sense of debunking lies, but we also need to defend ourselves. And both is very, very difficult because it's so easy to spread rumors, yeah, especially in democracies. And we need to take into account that this disinformation war, it has, if it is similar to 2014, and I assume that it is, it has two stages. First, we get all the disinformation about Ukraine and about we did or did, and then we will get this disinformation about anything that happens in Europe to weaken us. It is going to be a kind of reaction or a punishment because of the sanctions, of course, because there are very hard sanctions now, and Putin is going to try everything now to weaken our democracy, to weaken our institutions, EU. And remember 2015, we had the refugee crisis in Europe, and Russia did everything to make this crisis worse. Yeah, so in the media with Russia Today and all these outlets, Newsfront, and Russia Today is still not banned in the United Kingdom, and yeah, so I think we can expect a very, very difficult time on the information front. Not only that we have the war, which is super dangerous at the moment, we also have threats to democracy. We have still the COVID-19 crisis. We should not forget about it. So even if this situation calms a little bit, Russia will attack much, much stronger. And 1 year ago, no, 8 months ago or something, I was at an interview in Austrian television, and they told me I should speak about this influencer campaign. This was an influencer campaign to tell people in Western Europe that Pfizer is lethal and we should not take Pfizer. And then it turns out that this campaign was funded by, that it has its roots in Moscow. And they tried to push Sputnik and to not victimize that, to demonize Pfizer vaccines. This was all to create a kind of destruction in Europe, to create more confusion, to create more problems. And I think this is a good example for what we expect, but on a much bigger scale than me as well. And we will have a much bigger scale than we had ever before of disinformation. But maybe not, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Russia has not the potential to do it anymore because they're more focused on other things. For instance, domestic propaganda, because Russian population is getting more and more a little bit confused. There are a lot of people who are, brainwashed, but if they wake up, then they're going to be very angry. So it is difficult to predict, but I would say, I guess we have to be at least prepared to have a similar situation like in 2014 until now, but on a much bigger scale.
Danny, a question on the chat. I hear this morning in the media that President Putin told his troops to be prepared for a nuclear war. Is this correct, or is it fake news? Well, what do you think?
Yes, this is an official statement. So I received this message firsthand from Russian television. My friend from Kharkiv sent it to me because they can receive also Russian news. So they have they feel like they are in a madhouse because of that influence. And yeah, it's true that Russia says that all this kind of defensive system is working. This is including nuclear weapons. And this is not confirmed, so I don't want to spread any kind of fake news. So I say it's not confirmed, but there are videos circulating online in social media showing nuclear warheads or the facilities to shoot them driving into the western direction. But this is not; those are not confirmed reports. So I don't know, but it doesn't look that good. Yeah.
Well, the point is, creating confusion, creating chaos is one of the methods, is the main method. In fact, it doesn't matter. One of the sources I was reading, it doesn't matter who wins. When there's an election, they intervene in elections. It doesn't matter who wins, as long as there's confusion. As long as, if there is confusion, it's an advantage for Russia. If there's no confusion, like with the American elections, if there is no confusion, Russia doesn't win. And I think the American, what do you think about President Biden's and his administration approach to Russia this time? He tried to anticipate the disinformation. He tried to anticipate the kind of provocations, like when he said that there will be provocations to claim that the Ukrainians started it and that so Russia can invade. And perhaps because of that, the Russians could not count on smuggling on or creating this kind of fake attacks, and they had to actually come out and have a proper attack without claiming that it's the Ukrainians' fault. They can claim it in Russia, but not in front of the world opinion.
Yeah, first of all, we saw that this big false flag operation did not happen, but a lot of small ones. Yeah, so there was I remember a few days before the actual super war started, because there's always wars since 2014. But the big one started. There were, in Russian media especially, but also here in social media, you could witness it. There were so many false flag videos. It was ridiculous. Yeah, you saw that the filming, everything was strange. And my favorite one was when a man lost his foot, but you could see that he was having a prosthesis. Yeah, so he lost his foot probably years ago. Yeah, so it was, and he was screaming, and they had this fake blood over, and it was so really bad. And they removed this video, but of course the internet doesn't forget. So you were able to watch it. And I remember when this evacuation started in Donetsk and Luhansk. There were a lot of videos that got removed quickly because the disinformation were confused. They saw they had errors. The codes for the videos, they showed that they are quite older, that it is everything from a playbook. It was all planned on the long term. So there was the negotiations, we could not take them seriously. About the United States, it's difficult to I have no insight, but I guess that what President Biden was doing, he tried to reveal what his intelligence knows. So he thought two things. First of all, it is a warning. And secondly, it makes it more unlikely things to happen, because if you, like you said before, yeah, so you actually prevent it from happening. And he thought it would maybe happen with the attack as well, because Putin does not want to do what the American president tells him, yeah. But actually, as we see now, it happened, because this operation was planned for long term, and there was a point of no return for Vladimir Putin, and he decided to invade.
A question from Sia in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
Yes, I will read it. New Western sanctions aimed at buckling Russia's economy could significantly curb those energy exports to most countries abroad, or convince Moscow to halt exports on its own, depending on the severity of the sanctions and the Kremlin's response. What are the alternatives of EU to replace Russia in the energy market in short future to avoid the surge in prices and energy bills?
Well, I'm not an energy expert, so I'm not qualified to answer this question. I know that Norway is an emergency gas station, but I think this is going to be very difficult. And yeah, maybe the US. I mean, it's an emergency situation. We saw that Russia actually is threatening Europe with nuclear weapons. So I guess it's somehow even likely that we stop importing gas and we say, okay, before we get bombed, this is our last threat to Russia. But I think this is only my opinion. Yeah? I'm not an expert in energy policy, and I'm also not a psychologist, but my personal opinion is that somehow it seems like nothing changes Putin's minds, everything. He doesn't care about anything. And I think it's going to be very difficult for Europe. But we're still importing gas, as far as I know, and Gazprom is still delivering. But for the German viewers, it's very interesting that Schalke, who is sponsored by Gazprom, canceled the contract, so they are not a testimonial for this company anymore. And yeah, we will see. But maybe some energy expert or somebody very qualified in this topic is here to give a statement. I would very welcome it.
Something I read that Europe has a 90-day reserve. So even if gas was cut off today from Russia, we can carry on for 90 days. At least people will not freeze to death, and it will see us through at least part of springtime, and then we can import gas from other places. Well, perhaps Germany should slow down its phasing out of nuclear power stations. We've been discussing this in another webinar a few days ago, and Europe should push interconnections and new pipelines and interconnections, for instance, gas and electricity, because, for instance, Spain has and Portugal have ports, and they can liquefy again, look at natural gas, but it's very hard to export this liquefied natural gas, because once you have gasified it again, there are very few interconnections to France and to the rest of Europe. So sort of stays in Spain and Portugal. So the spare facilities exist, but they're not very usable, speaking of energy. But if we are better organized, and now suddenly the money is appearing to get better organized, like 100 billion euros for German defense suddenly appearing, we can perhaps be much more resilient to this kind of blackmail we're getting from Russia at the moment, or from any other unstable dictatorships around Europe, because we are quite well surrounded between the Middle East and Russia. We don't only have Russia to worry about. I see here we have a few questions. I see here that Christian saying, recently there has been a lot of anti-wind energy propaganda going on in Denmark. Much of this propaganda looks to be written by Putin's troll farms. Yes, indeed. You would think that, Dietmar, isn't it?
Yes, thank you very much for this input, because this is very interesting. I'm absolutely not surprised. This is another new, I would say, very likely created by the troll farms. And it's very clear, because you have a policy, you want to push gas, we want to see this undisplaceable, and then you push for it. And this is what these troll farms are doing, because people still believe in what they read in the comment lines. Yeah, and if you have a good content, I mean good, yeah, in the sense of it seems reasonable, yeah, then you can push it, and people start to repeat it, and this is the most dangerous situation. By the way, I want to mention at this point that I invited people from Ukraine that are in Ukraine, because I'm in constant contact with them. And one of them just wrote me she would like to join our meeting, but she can't, because at the moment it's an air alarm and she has to hide in a bunker. They have to go even if she's in the western parts, there's also an air alarm in Lviv and other cities. So the situation there is very terrible, and this is why people, it's difficult to reach them, but I will try it again.
Yes, thank you, Dietmar. Well, indeed, we are talking here comfortably from our homes or offices, but there are people under the bombs. So it's not an academic discussion. it's really a matter of life or death, whether we give in to the disinformation, whether we give in to the will to divide Europeans and divide the Europeans from the Ukrainians, or whether we actually try to make up our own mind and use our own brains. Jafar is the question.
Yeah, okay. It wasn't exactly a question. I just wanted to say something. I just wanted to put clear about a very important question, that does Russia has the right to invade Ukraine? Russians says that they attack Ukraine to secure their security. This was the main claims for Russians. But let us ask ourselves the very simple questions. If Russians win in this war in Ukraine, will they stop? This is the main question. They will not stop. If Russians win simply and easily in Ukraine, they will move in the next step to Latvia. And after Latvia, they will go to Lithuania. And after Lithuania, they will move to Poland. So it's a very complicated war now. So for Europe, what they can do now, I believe that the war in Europe should be as long as possible. Of course, in the end, I don't like that your Ukrainian peoples to suffer, but EU and even US, they cannot involve in this situation because if they involve in this situation directly, there will be a nuclear war. So no one can involve now. But Ukrainian peoples, they should be strong at this moment. And I guess that economic sanctions will do a very good job within the few days, or at least within a few weeks. And then Putin will feel that he is alone, even with his general leaders in his army. In the end, I don't want to. There is something I like to confirm, that I'm not happy to be anyone dead, even the Russian soldiers. I don't like to see them dead. What I'm speaking about is about humanity, only like this.
Yeah, I think you have an interesting points of view, Jafar. That the point here as well, we are talking about disinformation more than actually conducting the war itself. The point is, speaking of sanctions, we've seen today that the fairly strong sanctions the EU and the US announced yesterday had quite a catastrophic effect on the Russian central bank and the Russian stock exchange. So they are having an effect because they are strong enough. I was also reading today a story by Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize winning economist, writing for the New York Times, and he was saying that Russia is very vulnerable. Russian oligarchs are very vulnerable because...
Okay. I understand exactly this. I understand exactly this. Okay, we need to understand something, that in the end, Putin in this moment exactly like cat in the corner. So we cannot push him very hard. We should give him some way to move out of Ukraine, because in the end, if he is sensible or he is crazy, it's not important. But it's important that he can control nuclear weapon. We need to understand this. So
okay, let's not go into the strategy of running a war with Russia, because that's not the point of this evening. Let's stay with this information, otherwise we could go on all night. Thank you, Jafar. I have a question here from Mirko. Do you think that after this war, Russian disinformation campaigns will be as effective as today? I'm referring in particular to the economic sustainability of carrying on disinformation on the internet. Thank you.
First of all, I'm sorry for not following exactly the question, but I would like to give a brief statement about the discussion before. We are at a point that these scenarios are not as unlikely as they have been before. And if we talk about disinformation or information policy, then we actually see in Putin's speeches really signs that this is quite likely that such things could happen. Yeah, if we talk about Poland and the Baltic countries, and especially Finland, there was one incident a couple of days ago that Sweden and Finland, they are thinking about joining NATO because of the recent events. And the same happened like with Ukraine. He was talking about a military reaction. Yeah, so this is really, sorry to say, scary. We should, I think we should monitor what he's saying. And this refers to the question from, I think Mirko, was it? If the disinformation campaigns will stay as effective as they have been before. I think the problem is that the things that are happening now, they are not rational. They are, this is not like poker or like a chess game anymore. And it's based on lies, on a very deep, aggressive propaganda. We live in a world in a world of information, also a world of disinformation, but it is, if you want, you can debunk lies very easily. And when we take a look at what was happening in 2014, the whole disinformation about Russian-speaking people being discriminated, everything, it was very easy to create this confusion, because you can say, for instance, yeah, that this and that is happening in Kyiv or in Donetsk or Kharkiv, and nobody will tell you it's true or wrong, because almost nobody from Western Europe was in Ukraine. For me, it was just different because I was many times in Ukraine, so I had the kind of privilege to tell the world, no, it's not true. Like some Ukrainians tried, like some people also tried. But now we have a situation that so much insanity is happening. So if you ask me, I think it's going to be less efficient, maybe effective, but it will be very much more difficult to spread lies that actually are believed by many people, because the situation is getting more and more insane and obvious. And what we can witness in the last few days, that many people changed their mind. There were a lot of appeasers, or what we in Germany say, Putin-Versteher, yeah, which is an international word. It's even in the Russian-speaking world, this word exists. It's like Blitzkrieg. So yeah, we created another word for the world. And this is something that, so they basically do not exist. So only hardcore ideologists like AfD, FPÖ, far right, they are still full behind Putin, which is also quite scary. But I think it's going to be much, much more difficult to bring this propaganda, to place this propaganda in the center of society. it's not going to be in the middle of discussion. I think it's going to be for extreme ideology people, maybe they can still believe it, but it's going to be much, much more difficult. So strategically, I think Russia will try to create confusion about other topics. For instance, if we have a new pandemic or energy policy, like the thing with wind, with solar or wind, that would I try to confuse people, because nobody will think it's by Russia. They would think it's just an opinion. Yeah.
Yes, a very good point. I think, well, it mutates. It's like a malignant disease. It's not the same disinformation. It constantly mutates. The point is also that, first of all, this kind of cyber wars are very cheap. One bomb costs real money. Disinformation costs nothing. You put a few inventive kids, like they did in Macedonia in 2016, and they'll invent a countless amount of lies and make money on it. And it costs practically nothing or nothing. While debunking or fact-checking costs a lot of money, because you have to prove the truth, or you don't have to prove the lie. The lie just flies and goes around the globe as a meme without anybody actually paying attention. So he compels us to go onto his field and spend a lot of money and time and manpower trying to debunk the rubbish. And then anyway, there are people like in the States who couldn't care less about the truth. They know, or they don't care what is the truth. The truth is what I think it is, or what I want it to be. It is the greatest problem. People are not interested in truth. So we can be the best truth seekers, or the best specialists in the world debunking the lies, but some people are just not interested. There are a lot of them, nearly half of the American population, for instance. That's a lot. Ben, Ukraine can resist until there is so much attrition, morale, funding, economic collapse due to sanctions, equipment supplies that Russia cannot continue fighting. Christian, about follow-up invasions, that would be technically easier to attack. It would be technically easier to attack Finland than the NATO members, Baltic republics and Poland, probably. How would you analyze the Chinese official statements and rhetoric since the beginning of Russian invasion? Ibrahim Akai.
Okay, I will start. I think this is with the resistance of Ukraine or with the developments of the war. I don't want to predict anything. I think somebody in Russia should tell Putin to stop, because I guess he will not stop. Because he's obsessed with this war, and his whole propaganda machine is programmed to win this war. I think there will be no winner. I mean, at least Russia will not win, because it is going to be devastating. But I guess that one thing we should take into account, that if Putin wants to tell his own people that he won, then he can just tell it, because his propaganda machine will tell the people what they want to hear, or what is the thing. And they say, yeah, we finished the operation, everything is all right. And now they cannot treat us anymore, because there was never a threat. So he does not really need to exactly do what he planned to do. He could stop every day and still be the winner in the view of the Russian population. So because it doesn't matter now at all. People still believe in him, at least most of them, I fear. And so yeah, but it's very difficult from the information point of view. I think that he has the propaganda machine, so he can also tell his propaganda machine that the war is over, and he can sell it to his population as a big victory. About follow-up invasions, yes, Finland is part of the European Union, not of NATO. It's very close to NATO, so it's likely that NATO would support with weapons, but maybe not get directly involved. But there is a big but. Finland is part of the European Union, and this is also a security alliance. So basically every European member state is also needs to help Finland, but it's not exactly defined what kind of help it is. For instance, it can be money, it can be medical help, it can be weapons. Yeah, so it would be maybe similar to the situation in Ukraine now, but more intensive. But I guess that would be a real big escalation. I cannot predict what would happen if the European Union would send troops. I mean, countries of the European Union, because the EU cannot send troops. But it is, and I agree, it is a difference between Finland and a NATO country. But it's also a difference if a country is not part of the EU and it is. So Finland is somewhere in between. It's, I think it's more likely maybe, or easier Moldova or Georgia, but Finland would be my next guess, yeah. But it's, I don't want to predict. About the Chinese official statements, they are contradicting a little bit. They say, we want everything to be calm, but they stay neutral. And the last statements I heard were that they, if NATO gets involved or tries to help Ukraine, then they will fight on the side of Russia. So this is very dangerous, and we don't know what's going to happen in Taiwan. So something about Chinese cyber policy or social media policy, very interesting. It was 2 weeks, I think, before, maybe 10 days, I don't remember exactly, when I had this post on Twitter about the Olympic Games, and I received a big reaction by Chinese bots. It was about, there were about, I think, 50 or 60 or 100 reactions, negative reactions, yeah, with the same propaganda claims like, everything is all right in our country, take care about your own shit, something like that, and you have mass shootings every week. So of course they confused me with an American, obviously. And I gave this to a colleague. She's an analyst of Chinese disinformation in Washington. I showed her the tweet and she was tracking down the profiles, and she told me, yeah, this is a specific group attacking on social media, a troll farm in China, and they are based in China, yeah? And we know that Twitter usually doesn't work, but of course for them it does. So it was very, yeah, a little bit frightening even. And then recently I heard rumors that the Chinese, she told me that basically, that recently Chinese trolls are also engaging in this conflict, spreading pro-Russian narratives about the conflict. About the war. Yeah, you cannot call it a conflict then.
I see here a question from Christian, and then we'll take Zia. Back to the subject of disinformation, from how can we as ordinary citizens intervene if we see propaganda, mostly as retweets and copy paste talking points on social media?
This is one of the most difficult questions since 8 years, because I always answer it the same. I say it depends. If it's an obvious troll, first of all, report. Maybe the comment gets deleted. Social media platforms are now a little bit more responsible about that. And I think if it's a topic you are able to debunk it yourself, and if you think that disinformation is something that could get really in the middle of society, then you should really react. For instance, if somebody would post Vladimir Putin is the greatest president on earth, and Biden tries to kill him with nuclear weapons, probably I would not attack because it's ridiculous. But if it would be a disinformation like in Ukraine, Russian language is banned and the Russian-speaking population is in danger and there is a genocide, so this is basically something normal people could believe because they have no clue about Ukraine, then I would react and I would tell him 5 points to counter that disinformation, and because I'm not afraid about people who spread disinformation. I'm afraid about people reading it. Yeah, the people who are not maybe not even posting or writing anything on social media, but the ones who are reading and thinking it's the truth. This is what is even more dangerous.
Well, there's also the danger of amplifying. Some people post outrageous things on social media to get a reaction, and by reacting, we amplify to our own audience, the 100 or 200 or 500 people who follow us, who are within our circle, we amplify their rubbish. And the problem is of always reacting, raising to debate, we are amplifying automatically their disinformation. So sometimes it's best to let it go. Frankly, I personally, when I react, as you say, when something is absolutely outrageous or needs correcting, or there's a chance of getting through to those people, or I simply block them, report and block, because then you shrink their reach, because every time somebody blocks them, you shrink their reach, and this is what it's all about. Zia.
Yes, thank you very much for organizing. We are all crossing our hands for Ukraine. Yeah, but one thing was really awkward. I found that like part of the amplifying of this information for local audiences is to present Russia as not being the aggressor, but rather the defender of Russian people against Ukraine and NATO. And it's also to boost the morale of those people who are sent to Ukraine to kill their brothers and sisters. Essentially, because this is not like Germany and Russia in World War, and also we have these countries that are so interconnected with each other. And it's about selling the point that is necessary to invade Ukraine. I think they have to justify the war. Putin is not in a good position right now, economically or politically. He's not as strong he's been in the past. And we are all praying for our friends in Ukraine. Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, why is there a focus on providing this information within Russia? Like you mentioned really good points, but what will happen in the short future? What is the role of European Union to avoid this disinformation and to inform the media about the facts of the war and consequences of refugees and all the disasters? Thank you very much.
I think thank you for highlighting very important points. So I think we as the European Union, we should now to prevent the war, we should maybe think even about the Russian audience, to be honest, because they are the ones that can actually stop the war or stop Putin. At least I hope so, that there can be a change within Russia, because the propaganda machine is basically the only thing that Putin has to make his people believing into this war. Because I know Russian people would not support the war if they are not convinced by the propaganda, by the deep propaganda, that it's a good war or that the Ukrainians need to be punished. And if they would even know the scale of the war and the destructions, if they would see the pictures, they would start doubting. And many do already. I mean, there are demonstrations, and this is something. About the European Union, I think if I would have only 1 minute to answer the question, I would be very brief, and I say we should be prepared about disinformation about Ukraine, Russia, but this is not the biggest problem at the moment, because it's not 2014 and people are not that naive anymore. So probably, and politicians know what to do. They are informed. They react. There is no confusion in the scale like it was in 2014. So I think Russia will focus on harming us other ways. They would, like the wind energy we had before, the pandemics. It's always difficult to find examples, but domestic stuff, yeah. Maybe another refugee crisis from another place, and they would say, yeah, there's, I mean, in 2015, I was in Russia during winter time. It was December, it was for New Year's Eve. And I remember a woman came to me, she was working in that apartment, she was a kind of facility manager there, and she asked me, are you a refugee? Are you going to live in Russia? Because I heard there is a civil war going on in Vienna. I saw it on television. And I said, no, lady, there is no civil war. Everything is all right. And I'm here just, I'm a visitor. I will return to Vienna in 3 days. And then she was saying, yeah, but I saw it on television. I said, don't believe everything you see on television. And she told me, yes, sir, you are right. It was stupid. Of course, I know that I cannot trust television. Yeah. So I hope that she does not believe what she sees now. But this little story shows what they did in Russia 24. They showed people pictures from the refugee crisis in Vienna on one of the railway stations, and it was one day where there many people arrived, and there was a confusion, and it looked a little bit, yeah, it was not it was one day which was really bad situation, many people running around and a little bit craziness, but it was not a civil war. And they were showing this old footage from September still in December. And I said, come on, take a look. They're having no jackets, they're all in t-shirts. It's warm. It's not the situation of December. This is old footage, and they play it over and over again. And I guess, but this was for the domestic audience, yeah? But they do exactly the same, maybe a little bit precise for the Western audience or for the Europeans. And I guess they will pick up such things and try to amplify them. So like we amplify if we like, or if we discuss a lot, they amplify what is already existing. Like with Brexit, they amplify the Brexit campaign, Trump, so they can be they can create more disbalance, because we have problems, we have domestic problems. And this also refers to another statement. It's not only a problem of Russia. We have domestic disinformation. We have things going on in the US. This is more or less also domestic, but you have the opportunity to amplify these tendencies with not much money or even no money.
Okay, thank you, Dietmar. Well, something I'd like to add is that whatever approach we take to disinformation, misinformation, or inaccurate information, we must be absolutely, totally merciless with the press. The problem is if the press, if professionals who are trained, supposed to be trained, and supposed to have ethical principles, spread disinformation or do not check the facts correctly, we must do everything we can to correct the facts and to hold them responsible for what they are spreading. Because then there is no letting the likes, so even the New York Times saying incorrect things about the situation in Ukraine, etc. So we must intervene and say, look, you're wrong, correct it, and insist on it. I hear we have a few I don't know if you agree with me, Dietmar, but I think that press, we shouldn't let them get away with things as easily as some individual, some idiot on the internet. Question from André. Disinformation is not only a problem from Russia. If you think about COVID or QAnon, could it be a way for the whole of Europe to teach kids in school about disinformation like in Finland? That's a good point.
Yes, I think the schools is where we should start, but it's way not enough, because we need to have media literacy in adult education. So it is about no matter if you work as a plumber or if you are a lawyer or if you are a police officer, you should take a basic training in disinformation and media literacy. And this is the only way we can prevent this. And we have a lot of domestic disinformation as well. We need also to somehow cut these sources as well, because they are very easy to amplify. It's very much more difficult to create something new, or it's more easier to amplify something which is already existing. Also for the Russian disinformation, for instance, we have things like QAnon or any kind of disinformation like we have in Austria, this anti-vaccination movement. It's easy to amplify it. So we should take care about these things also better in the future.
we spoke about the press before.
Yeah, about the press. Thank you very much. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, about the press. I think that the last 5 weeks, talking about the escalation of this crisis by Russia, I was not satisfied with about the media coverage, because we saw that the press, that the journalists, they were not very educated, especially about Ukraine, but also not about Russia. They invited experts to discussions that were not qualified or were very close to Vladimir Putin's regime. They did not tell the audience exactly about the background. And they just repeated Vladimir Putin's statement without any kind of context. So actually they said there is Biden and there is Putin and they are talking to each other. But the problem is Biden, beside all the mistakes of the US, it's a democratic country with checks and balances. Putin is an autocrat, now he's a dictator. There is a disinformation machine, it's part of their foreign policy, it's disinformation. So we need to all his statements, we need to put them into this context of disinformation. And they did not. They really said it's about NATO enlargement, all these claims. This is one point of Putin's menu of ideology, but only a small point. The big point was recreating Russian Empire and recreating the Soviet Union, or some kind of mix between it. And this is actually what he revealed in his speeches, that he was lying all the time, but no one in the press was talking about it. This is my first big disappointment about the so-called mainstream press. And the second thing is that there was no coverage about what is actually going on in Russian television, in Russian media, because if you take a look at what is happening there, then you would see also his statements in another context, but he can rely that nobody cares what is happening, almost nobody. So he can tell us A and he can tell his audience B, and we don't even think that it's contradictory because we have no clue in the West. But I'm optimistic that this is going to change now.
Yes, it's interesting what you just said, Dietmar. I was at the news exchange in Turkey, in Istanbul, sitting next to an Arabic friend, and from Lebanon, and there was a person from Al Jazeera speaking, making some points at the meeting. It's a news executives meeting, and she said, and a colleague said, oh, she speaks very well, he's an intelligent man. She said, yes, very intelligent man, but you should listen to Al Jazeera in Arabic, because Al Jazeera in English is one thing, Al Jazeera in Arabic is something else altogether. Al Jazeera in Arabic is Muslim Brotherhood, and they have a completely different approach. Al Jazeera in English is pretty moderate, and they sort of provide Western style information with an Arab slant. But in Al Jazeera, Arabic is a completely different thing. So when you admire Al Jazeera, be careful. Anyway, this is the same context. Russian television abroad and Russian television in Russia must be something completely different.
I would like to add about what you said, because this is very interesting, that also Russia Today or RT or Sputnik is different in different countries. So for instance, in Spain, they like to address the far left, Podemos and the communists, because they have this anti-imperialistic this view, and it's very easy to target them to a pro-Russian narrative, yeah, because they are very far away from Russia. In Germany, it was a little bit mixed too, but they like to push this anti-vaxxer, Pegida, and such kind of movements. In Austria, it's also different. It goes with Germany, but they target different audiences in different countries, because they know what is the political landscape, where can they amplify a certain kind of movements or developments, and then they use it, and they use different messaging and different content for different countries. And this is exactly what you said with Al Jazeera.
Indeed, it works very well, because I just saw today that Podemos was complaining that the Spanish government is going to send weapons to Ukraine, and they were very unhappy about it. And they are in the government, although in minority. I see Ben here as a remark. Is it better to counter false information or to supplant false information with real information? Basically a bigger megaphone or both?
Yeah, I like the question very much because there's so much to tell about this topic. So we have a lot of work as European societies, a lot of work. Yeah? I think real information is the best thing. So it's not only about debunking, so fact checking, you say this is wrong because this is right. The best fact checker is the person who reads disinformation and can fact check it by him or herself. For instance, when I heard that in Kyiv it's forbidden to speak Russian, then I can tell everybody, sorry, that's a completely lie, because they speak Russian everywhere. I can differentiate it between Ukrainian, because, for instance, in Russian you say spasiba, in Ukrainian you say dyakuyu, completely different words, and so it's very easy to tell. Yeah, so I could fact check it myself. But in many cases, it's not possible. So what we need is reliable information. And if and this is very interesting, also very good input, if we have, so very good question, because if we have the intelligence, if we have the knowledge that this is a topic of disinformation, we can already provide it. We can already say, look, this is an information people will talk a lot about it. So we tell you the facts, please. We provide the facts for every citizen, what is going on in this crisis. And this is what media should do. But as we know, if media is not informed, if there are no experts, we have not enough money for journalism in these days. So basically, one journalist has to cover so many topics. I mean, for instance, Ukraine, this is for me something I follow for so many years. I visit the country so many times. It's yeah, it's very important. So I invest much more time than, for instance, a journalist that has to cover all the countries, has to cover Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, or the Balkans, and this is impossible to compute all the information, and this is the problem. So we need to provide information. We need to provide at least basics for everybody, because every citizen has not only to be media literate, everybody should be a little fact checker, because a good portion of general education is also a vaccination against disinformation, not only media literacy. So because if I know a good source, okay, but if I can debunk it by myself, because if I know the earth is not flat, then this is the start. Yeah, so if I am interested in satellites and how they work, if I'm interested in space exploration and spacecraft, then I know how if I basically know how it works, because it's some kind of a hobby, then I know that the earth is not flat. But if I don't believe in all that, if I have no background, then it's possible to imagine such. I mean, it's an extreme example, of course, but there are still people believing into that. And yeah, from this point of view, I think we need more general knowledge. We need better education in school, but this is a long-term process. So what I would suggest, if there is a very critical topic, we need to inform the population. We did this with the vaccination, we did this with COVID, but it's extreme difficult situation because we did not have enough knowledge. Even the experts did not know how is next month going to be, what other mutations or anything. So that was made it more critical for disinformation.
You made a very good point here, which I'd like to stress. You're saying the press, that the journalists don't have the time to do research in depth and to be specialized, because they have to cover so many subjects and they have to know so many things. It's impossible. One of the points I try to make, pay for the media, take subscriptions to magazines, newspapers, TV, whatever, pay for the media. You cannot write for free. You cannot produce good photography, good videos for free. It doesn't work that way. And advertising is not enough. And reading everything online for free, well, somebody has to pay for it. If you're not paying for it, somebody's buying these journalists or buying this content and selling you anything they want, any kind of information they want. And usually it's billionaires buying the press, which is starved for money and resources, and they simply give you any kind of rubbish they want. Another point I'd like to make is I was born in Poland. And I think one thing you learn in Eastern Europe, or at least you learned at the time, you don't trust the authorities. And you don't trust the press because the press is controlled by the authorities. So there is a basic skill you learn when you start reading ABC, you read between the lines. It's not just that you learn to read, you read between the lines. When you read the story that our Prime Minister has spoken of, the First Secretary has spoken of the great success of the agricultural the crop or something, it means that there'll be a shortage of potatoes. Because between the lines, it says we have to make an effort in this and that. Okay, so we'll be short of potatoes, or there will be a shortage of this, or there'll be a shortage of this, because you know that they're lying. And they're very creative in lying, but you can also read between the lines. And that's how you learn also to trust conspiracy theories, because you don't trust your government. So this basic skill seems to have disappeared. People don't read between the lines when they read content, or read between the lines in order to accept conspiracy theories.
Yes, it's me.
First
of all, I wanted to say thank you, Dietmar, for being available at very short notice for this webinar. It was again very interesting, and also thank you, Piotr, for being our host again tonight. I just wanted to make sure, because maybe we have overseen the question, or maybe I have overheard the answer, but there was a question from Ibrahim. How would you analyze the Chinese official statements and rhetoric since the beginning of Russian invasion? Have we talked about that? Have I overheard it, or was the question overseen?
Yeah, actually, we had.
I missed it. Okay.
It. But would you like to add anything else, Dietmar?
Love to repeat it because it was very very important and frightening, because actually the first statements from China were that they want the war to end. It was but they will stay neutral, and they don't want to make a statement against Russia, but they want to, and they accept the territorial integrity of Ukraine. They have, what we need to know, they have a close relationship with Ukraine as well, economic relationship. And I was looking today for, because I'm a little bit promoting the EU accession process from Ukraine. And I was doing some research to find this poll. And what I found was another poll. I didn't check it out, but I remember it now. Why Ukrainians still love China so much, yeah, or like China, or have a favorable view about China. It was before the war, I'm sure, yeah. So this was the Chinese government on the first stance was quite moderate, not really pro-Russian. It was very similar to the Serbian statements, but now it changed. They said if somebody attacks and helps Ukraine, then they will fight in line with Russia. So this is very scary, very dangerous, and I have no clue. And what I also heard is from an analyst in Washington, DC. She is specialized on Chinese disinformation. She told me that there is a Chinese operation to amplify Russian propaganda, that the trolls are working and spreading Russian narratives about the war with Ukraine.
Thank you. That's very clear. Any other questions? Yes, Federico, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add something about China, because I live in China, so I kind of see this in with my own eyes. I don't speak Chinese, but my wife is Chinese, and I've been watching Chinese propaganda for a few years now. And there are directives given to newspapers and public medias in China that say you have to talk about the conflict with Ukraine in a positive way, and you cannot call it war, you cannot call it invasion. You always have to portray Russia as positively, and you cannot publish positive news about the European Union, US, and allies that involve the conflict with Ukraine. So there is like a real institutional effort to spread only good news about Russia, and people in general in China, even for years now, they have a kind of positive view of Russia because of the kind of friendship, or at least it looks like a friendship between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, and also the fact that now at the Olympic Games, Putin said we fully support China about the Taiwanese issue, and Taiwan is part of China, etc. And before, he never said it that directly. And so I think that the Chinese government really hoped that Russia would back them up in case of an invasion of Taiwan. And that I think why it's why China is trying to just have Chinese people like have a good view of Russia, and have Russia have a good view of China, so that they can back each other up, because they have they both have interests in expanding their areas, but they are not conflicting areas. So they're at the moment, at least, their interests are not really conflicting. So
I was hoping that you have something that contradicts what I heard, but this even,
yeah,
I
unfortunately,
have no words.
I agree with you.
This is I'm out of words. This is not new good news. Yeah. So, what do you think? Is Chinese population, are they believing everything they're hearing? Do they actually care, or is the conflict more a minor issue? I saw in South America, even in democracies, it seems that they do not care so much because it's far away. So,
yeah, I can tell you, like, my personal experience when I talk with Chinese people about these things. They always tell me, don't believe fake news. You cannot trust what Western media say. So you're brainwashed. You know, they tell me that. So, and then they don't believe most things that are happening in China, like in Xinjiang, what's happening there, in Tibet, the repression of the Tibetan language and Tibetan people. They think it's all Western fake news, especially US propaganda. And then there are exceptions, of course. There are also Chinese people. I have some friends that are against the government, and they think that China would be better if it was more free and a democracy. But I think that the majority in China believes the propaganda, and it's kind of like shocking, because it's so obvious to me that it's propaganda, because everything is censored. You cannot publish anything on social networks that is against the regime, and they know that, because if they try, they cancel they delete their posts. But yet they think that when I tell them this, they say, well, the government does it to protect us from disinformation from the West. So they are doing it to protect us.
This is exactly, by the way, this is exactly what the trolls on Twitter told me, that Twitter is banned because it's not possible for you to access Twitter right now, yes?
No, yeah, well, you need a VPN. You can
but normally not. And the trolls told me Twitter is banned, and because they want to be protected from all the garbage that we are talking.
I mean, that's what most people think, unfortunately. I mean, propaganda there is very effective.
And when I was speaking, and what is also really crazy, when I was speaking to Russian people who believe in still believe in Vladimir Putin, I had a similar experience than you have when you speak to Chinese people. They told me what our media is fake news, disinformation by our reporters and everything. But the problem is, and I told them, no, it's not. I don't care about what's in the media. I was in Ukraine 50, 40 times. I know that this is not true what your government says and what your media is telling, because I saw it with my own eyes. Do you think that I'm insane or crazy? And then they still say, no, you are brainwashed. You only see what you want to see, everything. So that I think it's very difficult to change the opinion if somebody is brainwashed for a long time.
You know, that I don't know whether it's the same in Russia, but in China, there is something that people always say. They say, you cannot, you don't know what's happening in China because you didn't grow up here. We grew up here, so we know how things are, and we are happy here. I mean, there's something called adaptive preferences. If you grow up in an environment where everybody is like you, even if it's an oppressive environment, you don't really realize that you're oppressed. And so there is this idea that since I didn't grow up there, then I must be brainwashed.
And it's not only media, it's also education system, of course, schools, kindergarten, even this whole lifestyle of an autocracy or dictatorship. It's
okay. Thank you, Federico. Right. Do we have any final questions? I think we're closing, getting close to the end of this session. Okay. If there are no more questions, well, thank you very much, Dietmar. I think it was really good to have this discussion as things are unrolling at the moment. Hopefully things will get clearer within the next few days. And we're certainly looking forward to getting back talking with you within the next few days or weeks or months, whenever you have the time to also see a bit clearer in the situation. You help us to see sometimes through the fog of war. So this is a very, I hope we know more and better than we did before this session, Dietmar. And yes.
I just want to interfere real quick. I put the link to our webinar feedback survey into the chat. It would be great if you attend or participate or fill in the form, so we can improve our webinars and also collect your ideas for future webinars. So that would be highly appreciated by all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Thanks all. Good night to all, and see you soon. We are trying to put together a session with our Russian friends, or at least one of them so far. We are waiting for reply to the exact date when he's available. We will watch this space. We will be sending emails, posting on our website and on Facebook and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, whatever we post. So watch this space. We're trying to get something. It'll be short notice, but it is urgent to talk with Russians about what's going on in Russia from the opposition. Thank you and good night to all.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. I want to highlight that another woman I invited for today's discussion is going to the bomb shelter with her little kids. So both of them could not join because of air alert. It's really a terrible situation. So I start praying even if I'm not religious. Have a good night.
Thank you, Dietmar. Yes, indeed. It's thank you. We were just worrying yesterday about a friend. We had a webinar with her in January. She was arrested during a demonstration over Nemtsov bridge, where Nemtsov was killed, and she was arrested because she carried a Ukrainian flag. So yes, we all know people.
She's a hero. She's the hero.
She's a hero. She has a 7-year-old girl. So yeah, it takes a lot of courage. So thank you, Dietmar. Thanks all. Good night.
Good night.